Friends, if you want to watch the super hit movie Run, 2020, in English, then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, do not forget to subscribe to our channel and stay connected for more movie-related updates. In today's video, the movie we are going to talk about is called Run, 2020. This video will provide you with a complete overview of this thrilling movie, from what it is about to where you can watch it, and all the interesting behind-the-scenes details. We will also cover the technical departments, the music, pre-production efforts, filming process, post-production details, budget, and box office performance. Alongside this, I will provide you with a concise story overview and share a short review of the plot. We will break down the performances of the star cast, explain who played which role, and highlight any standout moments from the film. So make sure to watch this video till the end to get everything you need to know about Run, 2020. Run, 2020 is a psychological thriller that gained wide attention for its gripping storyline and intense performances. The movie revolves around a mother and daughter relationship that hides dark secrets. The story follows a homeschooled teenager named Chloe who begins to suspect her mother of hiding something terrible from her. As the narrative unfolds, layers of mystery and tension are revealed, keeping the audience on edge throughout. This film stands out not only for its suspenseful plot but also for the way it combines psychological elements with emotional depth, making it more than just a thriller. When it comes to the technical departments, Run, 2020 excelled in many areas. The cinematography captured the tense and confined settings perfectly, creating a sense of unease that matches the film's theme. The lighting choices, especially during the night scenes, contributed to the eerie and unsettling mood. The production design was kept simple but effective, focusing on the details of the house where most of the events take place. The editing was tight and precise, ensuring that the tension never drops, and the pacing keeps the viewers engaged from start to finish. The background score added to the suspense without overwhelming the scenes, while the sound design was carefully crafted to highlight the smallest of movements and moments. In terms of pre-production, a lot of effort was put into casting the right actors for the main roles and creating a script that would deliver a powerful impact. The filmmakers focused on building a story that was not only thrilling but also emotionally gripping. Filming primarily took place in controlled locations, which allowed the team to maintain the atmospheric tone of the movie. The director ensured that the actors had enough space to explore their characters deeply, leading to strong on-screen chemistry and believable performances. The post-production phase involved meticulous editing, sound mixing, and color grading to enhance the overall feel of the movie. Special care was given to maintain the suspense through tight cuts and the gradual reveal of key plot points. The color palette was slightly muted to emphasize the psychological undertones and the dark secrets the story holds. The music in Run, 2020, was composed to complement the mysterious and tense nature of the film. It does not overpower the scenes but works as an invisible thread, connecting emotions and suspense. As for the budget and box office performance, Run, 2020, was not a big-budget film, but it managed to deliver high-quality production with a moderate investment. The movie performed well commercially, especially considering its genre and scale. It received positive reviews from both critics and audiences, with praise directed toward its tight script, effective direction, and outstanding performances. The lead actors played their roles exceptionally well, with Sarah Paulson portraying the controlling mother in a chilling yet emotionally complex way, and Kiera Allen delivering a strong and convincing performance as Chloe, the daughter who uncovers the disturbing truth. The story of Run, 2020, keeps the audience engaged by slowly revealing the true nature of the mother-daughter relationship. Each scene builds on the previous one, leading to a tense and dramatic climax. The film is not overloaded with unnecessary twists, but the ones it has are impactful and leave a lasting impression. The suspense is well balanced with emotional moments, making the characters feel real and their struggles relatable. In review, Run, 2020, is a must-watch for fans of psychological thrillers. It offers a compact and intense experience with a focus on character-driven storytelling. The pacing, acting, and technical finesse all come together to create a movie that stays with you even after the credits roll. If you enjoy movies that combine mystery with emotion, Run, 2020, is definitely worth your time. Run is a 2020 American psychological horror thriller directed by Aneesh Chaganty and written by Aneesh Chaganty and Seva Hanian, starring Sarah Paulson as Diane Sherman and Kiera Allen as Chloe Sherman, with Pat Healy as the mailman Tom and Sarah Sohn as the hospital nurse. The story starts with Diane anxiously visiting her premature baby in an incubator and then jumps forward to show Chloe as a homeschooled teenager presented as suffering from multiple health problems including arrhythmia, hemochromatosis, asthma, diabetes and paralysis in her legs, confined to a wheelchair and dependent on a careful schedule of medications administered by Diane. Chloe is inquisitive and mechanically gifted but frustrated by the limits imposed on her life and the lack of responses to her college applications. One day Chloe finds a prescription bottle of small green pills in a grocery bag that bears Diane's name and later notices a pasted label with Chloe's name over the original, which sets her on a path of secret investigation. After calling a stranger to ask about the drug and then visiting a pharmacy, Chloe learns the pills are a relaxant called lidocaine that has been approved for veterinary use and that in humans it can cause paralysis, a discovery that confirms her suspicion that something about her condition is being falsified. Chloe experiments with her mobility after being denied access to her medicines, discovering she can move a toe and that the wheelchair dependence may be artificially maintained, and she makes several attempts to escape the house including breaking through a window and using a mail truck to try to reach help. When Diane intercepts Chloe at the mail truck, she stabs the mailman Tom with a syringe and Chloe later wakes chained in the basement to find a set of old photos that show her walking, a death certificate for a baby named Chloe who died shortly after birth and an article about a child stolen from the same hospital, evidence that Diane kidnapped and then fabricated an illness to keep Chloe dependent. The confrontation escalates as Diane reveals how far she will go to keep Chloe under her control and even prepares a homemade neurotoxin to make Chloe forget the truth, prompting Chloe to swallow an organophosphate in a bid to force a hospital evaluation, which briefly frees her from Diane until Diane sneaks back into the hospital armed and attempts to escape with Chloe by subduing staff and dragging her away. The escape ends in a violent standoff with security in which Diane aims a gun and is shot and falls down a staircase, an incident that ultimately leads to Diane's incarceration. The film closes with a time jump 7 years later showing Chloe living a rebuilt life as a prosthetist with a husband and daughter while Diane lies bedridden in a correctional facility, and in a chilling final beat Chloe visits Diane bringing 3 of the same lidocaine pills she once ingested and tells Diane she loves her before ordering her to open wide, a gesture that implies Chloe intends to turn Diane's own method of control back on her. Run uses tight enclosed settings and a slow reveal to explore themes of control, coercion and the blurring line between caregiving and abuse with powerful central performances from Paulson and Allen, and the film has been discussed in relation to real-life Munchausen by proxy cases as well as the filmmaker's earlier Searching project which places it in a contemporary digital era style and compact runtime. The revelation in the basement that Chloe was not biologically Diane's child, but instead a child stolen from the hospital reframes earlier scenes and forces the audience to reassess Diane's version of maternal sacrifice as a form of possession rather than protection. Chloe's resourcefulness and gradual shift from fearful dependent to deliberate agent is shown in practical beats from breaking a window with a soldering iron to smuggling pills into a prison visit years later, and the film keeps its focus tightly on the 2 central performances so that every small physical move becomes narratively significant. Run does not rely on elaborate plot contrivances beyond the central fraud, instead choosing to let the slow accumulation of evidence and the mounting claustrophobia of the domestic setting deliver its shocks and to leave viewers contemplating the long-term consequences of control and restitution. It is a compact thriller that lingers in the mind still. Run, 2020, begins with a tense opening that sets the tone for everything that follows. The film opens with a premature baby lying in an incubator as her mother Diane Sherman, played by Sarah Paulson, watches over her with a worried yet determined expression. This first image creates an immediate sense of urgency and vulnerability, hinting at a mother who is willing to do anything to keep her child alive. The story then jumps forward 17 years to show Chloe Sherman, portrayed by Kiera Allen, a homeschooled teenager who uses a wheelchair and is said to suffer from multiple medical conditions including asthma, diabetes, arrhythmia, hemochromatosis, and paralysis. The setup establishes Chloe's dependent life under the strict supervision of Diane, who provides her with daily medications and limits her world to the home and a carefully managed routine. This is where the audience is made to believe that Diane is a caring, overprotective mother, while Chloe is a bright and curious girl longing for independence and a chance to attend college. The inciting incident occurs when Chloe finds a bottle of pills in a grocery bag with Diane's name on it, but later notices a label pasted over it bearing her own name. Her curiosity is piqued, and her instincts tell her something is not right. This small discovery begins to unravel the controlled environment Diane has built. The story reveals information in a linear fashion, but it is carefully measured so the audience learns the truth step by step along with Chloe. The rising action unfolds as Chloe starts to secretly investigate the mysterious green pills. She manages to call a pharmacy using a stranger's phone and learns that the pills are a muscle relaxant called Lidocaine, intended for dogs and capable of causing paralysis in humans. This revelation becomes the first major turning point of the film, shifting both Chloe's understanding of her life and the audience's perception of Diane from a protective mother to a potentially sinister figure. From here, the tension rises with each attempt Chloe makes to gain freedom or expose the truth. Scenes where she tests her own physical limits, such as trying to move her toes and dragging herself out of her wheelchair, become crucial moments that highlight her determination. Another major turning point occurs when Chloe tries to escape using the mail truck, only for Diane to intercept her and inject the mailman Tom, played by Pat Healy, with a sedative. This moment not only reinforces Diane's dangerous resolve, but also traps Chloe in a deeper sense of isolation. The narrative plays mostly in real time, keeping the timeline straightforward, yet it creates suspense by controlling when and how information is revealed. For instance, the discovery of the basement later in the film serves as the emotional and narrative midpoint where Chloe finds old photographs of herself walking, a death certificate of another baby named Chloe, and a newspaper clipping about a kidnapped infant. This confirms that Diane is not her real mother and that Chloe's illnesses were fabricated to keep her under control. The rising action peaks as Diane prepares to administer a neurotoxin to make Chloe forget the truth. In a desperate act, Chloe swallows an organophosphate to induce a medical emergency, forcing Diane to take her to the hospital. This act of self-harm is both a literal and emotional turning point, as it shows Chloe reclaiming agency in the most extreme way possible. The finale begins with a tense hospital sequence where Diane sneaks in to abduct Chloe once again, overpowering staff and dragging her toward an escape. The climax occurs when Diane, cornered by security, raises a gun and is shot, falling down a staircase. This moment marks the collapse of her control and the liberation of Chloe. The final beat of the narrative takes place 7 years later, showing Chloe as an adult with a family, visiting Diane who is now bedridden in a correctional facility. In this haunting closing scene, Chloe brings Lidocaine pills and tells Diane she loves her before ordering her to open wide, suggesting a dark yet poetic reversal of control. The film leaves deliberate gaps for interpretation here, allowing viewers to question whether Chloe is seeking justice, revenge, or closure. Key scenes that should not be missed include the moment Chloe first moves her toe, the basement revelation, the mail truck escape, and the final visit to the prison. These scenes do more than move the plot forward, they define the emotional peaks of the film. Run uses a linear structure but with carefully timed reveals that tighten the experience and keep viewers questioning the motives and dynamics of its two central characters. Run, 2020, is a story driven by two central characters whose relationship defines the tension and emotional weight of the film. At its core, the movie is about Chloe Sherman, played by Kiera Allen, and her mother Diane Sherman, portrayed by Paulson. When the film begins, Chloe is introduced as a bright, curious, and somewhat sheltered teenager who believes she suffers from numerous health conditions including asthma, arrhythmia, diabetes, hemochromatosis, and paralysis that confines her to a wheelchair. Her world is limited to her home and her interactions with her overprotective mother. Chloe's initial want is simple: independence. She eagerly waits for acceptance letters from colleges and dreams of a life beyond the walls of her house. What stands in her way is not just her perceived illnesses but also her mother's controlling presence, which appears at first to be rooted in care but is gradually revealed to be deeply manipulative. Diane, on the other hand, is introduced as a devoted and self-sacrificing mother. In the opening scene, we see her worrying over her premature baby in an incubator, a moment that seems to define her as loving and anxious for her child's well-being. At the beginning, her apparent want is to keep her daughter safe, healthy, and close to her. However, as the narrative progresses, it becomes clear that what Diane truly desires is control and emotional possession of Chloe. Her hidden motive is to ensure that Chloe remains dependent on her, both physically and emotionally, even if that means fabricating illnesses and limiting her life opportunities. Diane's arc is not one of redemption or transformation, but rather one of exposure. By the end of the film, she is unmasked as a kidnapper and abuser who stole Chloe as an infant and used fabricated medical conditions to create a permanent bond of dependency. Chloe undergoes the most significant character development in the story. She starts as a trusting and obedient daughter, but as she begins to uncover the truth about her mother and her own health, her arc shifts towards independence, courage, and self-reliance. Subtle beats throughout the film show this transformation. The first time she moves her toe despite believing she is paralyzed, the determined look on her face as she crawls across the floor to find answers, and her willingness to risk her life by ingesting poison to escape her mother's control. Each of these moments reflects her growing agency. By the time the story reaches its climax, Chloe has evolved into a proactive force, no longer a passive victim but someone willing to make difficult decisions to free herself. Diane, conversely, shows a form of regression. While she begins as a seemingly composed and nurturing figure, cracks start to appear in her demeanor as Chloe resists her authority. Small gestures such as her tightening grip on Chloe's wheelchair, her increasingly panicked tone when questioned, and her violent actions toward anyone who threatens her secret reveal her descent into desperation. She becomes more volatile and dangerous as her lies begin to unravel, culminating in her resorting to violence and abduction in the hospital sequence. The side characters in Run, 2020, serve functional but meaningful roles. Tom, the mailman played by Pat Healy, represents a fleeting hope of escape for Chloe and symbolizes the outside world she longs for. His brief interaction with Chloe and tragic end underline how isolated and controlled her life truly is. The nurse at the pharmacy and hospital staff also serve as narrative devices to either provide Chloe with pieces of information or to highlight how Diane manipulates her environment to maintain control. While these characters do not have deep arcs of their own, they are not mere window dressing. Their presence helps illustrate the world's potential to help Chloe, as well as Diane's ability to cut off those connections. The final scene 7 years later shows the ultimate reversal of their dynamic. Chloe, now grown, married, and a mother herself, visits Diane in a correctional facility where Diane lies bedridden. Chloe's line telling her mother to open wide as she reveals the same lidocaine pills used to paralyze her symbolizes not just revenge but also how trauma can leave lasting marks. Chloe has become stronger and independent, but this moment leaves viewers questioning whether her actions represent closure or a continuation of control in a different form. In summary, Run, 2020, crafts its protagonist and antagonist with sharp contrasts. Chloe's arc is one of awakening and empowerment, moving from a state of naive trust to self-determined action, while Diane represents the dangers of obsessive attachment disguised as care, unraveling from a composed motherly figure to a desperate and violent manipulator. The film's emotional peaks, such as the basement discovery and the hospital confrontation, are not only turning points in the plot but also clear reflections of how both characters change in response to the truth being exposed. The performances in Run, 2020, are at the heart of why the film works so effectively as a psychological thriller. Sarah Paulson as Diane Sherman delivers a performance that is both commanding and unsettling. From the opening moments, Paulson establishes Diane as a mother with layers of devotion, fear, and quiet menace. Her timing in dialogue delivery is precise, often pausing just long enough to create a sense of unease. The physicality she brings to the role, from her tense posture when controlling Chloe's wheelchair to her sudden bursts of violence, adds to the danger that lurks beneath her calm exterior. One of the standout moments is the basement confrontation where her calm voice barely conceals the fury and desperation beneath. Her ability to shift from tender to terrifying in an instant is what makes her performance linger in the mind. Kiera Allen, making her feature film debut as Chloe Sherman, is a revelation. Her portrayal of Chloe is layered with vulnerability, intelligence, and growing strength. Allen, who uses a wheelchair in real life, brings authenticity to the physical demands of the role while also delivering emotional depth that makes Chloe both sympathetic and compelling. Her vocal choices in scenes where she pleads for freedom or challenges her mother's lies are powerful without tipping into melodrama. A key moment that highlights her skill is the scene where she discovers the true nature of the pills and begins to question everything she has been told. The fear in her eyes is mixed with a spark of determination, showing a young woman on the edge of transformation. Allen's timing in the quieter scenes, such as when she tests her toe movement alone in her room, demonstrates her ability to carry tension without needing grand gestures. The chemistry between Paulson and Allen is central to the film's success. Their dynamic oscillates between warmth and hostility, creating a mother-daughter bond that feels lived-in yet dangerously imbalanced. Scenes like the one at the dinner table, where Diane's controlling tendencies subtly surface, or the hospital abduction sequence, where their relationship reaches a violent climax, are effective because both actors commit fully to the emotional stakes. Paulson plays the manipulative mother not as a caricature but as someone who genuinely believes in her twisted version of love, while Allen plays Chloe as someone slowly reclaiming power without losing the vulnerability that makes her human. Pat Healy as Tom the mailman, though given limited screen time, leaves a lasting impression. His performance is understated but effective, providing a brief glimmer of normalcy and potential escape for Chloe. The moment he realizes something is wrong and tries to help her is played with a mix of suspicion and quiet compassion. His sudden death at the hands of Diane is shocking not because of the violence itself but because Healy manages to make Tom feel like a genuine person whose loss registers emotionally. Sarah Sohn as the hospital nurse also brings a grounded presence to her brief scenes, serving as part of the larger world outside the Sherman household. Her interactions with Chloe feel natural and highlight how foreign normal human connection is to Chloe's isolated life. These smaller performances, though not central to the plot, help flesh out the world and heighten the stakes for the protagonist. If there is any criticism in the performances, it may come from the lack of more developed secondary roles. While the story is intentionally confined to the relationship between Diane and Chloe, the supporting characters sometimes feel more like narrative functions than fully realized people. However, this is a minor issue in a film that relies so heavily on the tension between its two leads. One of the most electric moments of acting comes in the final scene 7 years later, when Chloe visits Diane in the correctional facility. Kiera Allen's delivery of the line telling her mother to open wide carries a chilling calm that contrasts with the desperation of her younger self. Sarah Paulson, now frail and bedridden, conveys a mixture of fear and recognition with just her eyes. No grand monologue is needed. The restraint in their performances speaks volumes about the power shift that has occurred. Overall, Run, 2020, benefits immensely from performances that elevate its tightly written script. Sarah Paulson disappears into a role that could have easily been overplayed, creating a villain both terrifying and pitiful. Kiera Allen emerges as a strong new talent, carrying the film's emotional weight with quiet resilience and bursts of fiery determination. The chemistry between them transforms the story from a simple thriller into a tense psychological battle, with each small gesture and line delivery building toward an unforgettable climax. The direction of Run, 2020, is a key element that shapes the film into a tight, tense, and immersive psychological thriller. Directed by Aneesh Chaganty, who co-wrote the screenplay with Sevahanian, the movie carries a distinct sense of control over every aspect of its presentation, from its pacing to its visual style. Chaganty, known for his debut feature Searching, brings a similar precision to Run, though here he trades the digital screen-based narrative of his earlier work for a more confined, physically intense setting. From the very first frame of the premature baby in the incubator, he sets a tone of unease mixed with maternal desperation, immediately placing the audience in a state of tension that does not easily let go. One of Chaganty's strongest directorial choices is the film's pacing. Run moves at a brisk yet deliberate rhythm, never rushing its reveals but also avoiding unnecessary filler. The narrative unfolds linearly, which complements the film's central theme of a daughter uncovering hidden truths in real time. This choice ensures that the audience learns information alongside Chloe, aligning us with her perspective and amplifying the suspense. Each scene is staged to maximize the sense of claustrophobia that defines Chloe's life. The camera often lingers in tight spaces, hallways, door frames, the confines of the kitchen, making the house feel less like a home and more like a cage. Chaganty frequently employs close-ups and medium shots rather than wide establishing frames, creating intimacy while also limiting the viewer's scope of vision. This stylistic choice mirrors Chloe's limited freedom and keeps the viewer guessing about what lurks just beyond the edges of the frame. When movement is used, it is often purposeful and controlled rather than flashy. Long tracking shots are used sparingly, but when they appear, such as when Chloe crawls across the floor to retrieve the phone, they heighten tension by forcing the audience to follow her slow, painful progress without relief. Abrupt cuts are deployed in moments of high stakes, such as the mail truck confrontation or the hospital abduction, creating a jarring impact that matches the emotional spike of those scenes. Another hallmark of Chaganty's direction is how he guides performances. Sarah Paulson and Kiera Allen give performances that are rich in nuance, and this is a direct result of a director who allows room for subtlety. Chaganty does not rely on over-explaining emotions or inserting unnecessary dialogue. Instead, he often lets pauses, silences, or small gestures carry meaning. Diane's quiet moments of manipulation, handing over pills, adjusting a wheelchair, locking a door, are staged in a way that seems mundane on the surface yet takes on an unsettling weight because of how the camera lingers just long enough to make us question her intentions. In terms of tone, Chaganty strikes a careful balance between suspense and emotional drama. The film does not lean heavily into gore or overt horror. Instead, it thrives on psychological tension and a slow-burning sense of dread. The director uses muted colors and controlled lighting to emphasize the cold, controlled environment Diane has created for Chloe. Shadows are used sparingly but effectively, particularly in the basement scenes and nighttime sequences, to evoke a sense of hidden danger. A particularly confident directorial decision is how the film handles its midpoint revelation. Rather than relying on a dramatic flashback or heavy exposition, the truth of Chloe's captivity and fabricated illnesses is revealed through visual evidence. Photographs, documents, and the physical setting of the basement. Chaganty trusts the audience to piece together the story without being spoon-fed, which enhances engagement and respect for viewer intelligence. If there are questionable choices, they may lie in the limited exploration of the outside world and supporting characters. While this confinement works to heighten the tension, it also leaves the narrative feeling slightly insular at times, with only fleeting glimpses of normalcy beyond Diane's control. Some viewers may find the final scene's tonal shift, a 7-year time jump showing Chloe in a position of power over her bedridden mother, abrupt compared to the tense, claustrophobic core of the film. However, it can also be interpreted as a deliberate move by the director to leave the audience with a lingering sense of unease rather than a neat resolution. Overall, Aneesh Chaganty's direction makes Run, 2020, a compact and gripping experience. His preference for close-ups, linear storytelling, and carefully staged tension creates a claustrophobic yet emotionally charged atmosphere. The confident handling of performances, particularly allowing Sarah Paulson's manipulative calm and Kiera Allen's gradual awakening to shine, demonstrates a director in control of his material. Even where the film limits itself, that restraint is part of its identity, and it is this controlled vision that allows the story to resonate long after the credits roll. The cinematography in Run, 2020, serves as one of its strongest elements, using the camera not only as a tool to show the story but as a participant in its tense, claustrophobic world. From the opening scenes, the framing immediately signals the tone. Wide shots are deliberately sparse, often reserved for moments when the main character contemplates escape or when the isolation of her world becomes overwhelming. These wide compositions emphasize how small and trapped she feels in the larger setting. In contrast, tight framing dominates most of the runtime, keeping the viewer close to her expressions, her hands, and the small details of her restricted environment. This choice intensifies the psychological tension, creating a feeling that the camera itself is an intruder, constantly watching, just as her mother does within the narrative. Camera movement is restrained yet purposeful. Slow tracking shots often follow her movements, mirroring her cautious, deliberate actions. When tension spikes, the film occasionally employs abrupt shifts in angle or slightly shaky handheld movement to convey panic or urgency, pulling the viewer into her unstable emotional state. These transitions are not overused, making the moments when they occur feel earned rather than gimmicky. Color palettes also play a critical role. Muted greens, cool blues, and washed-out neutrals dominate the house interiors, creating a cold, sterile sense of confinement. There are no overly saturated tones except in a few significant objects or fleeting moments of imagined freedom, which draw the eye and remind the viewer of what has been denied. Lighting complements this restrained palette with a tendency toward naturalistic sources during the day, soft window light casting partial shadows, and low, almost oppressive lighting at night. This interplay builds the sense of a home that looks safe but hides menace in its corners. One of the standout elements of the cinematography is how it uses focus to reflect control and power dynamics. Depth of field is often shallow when the protagonist is at her most vulnerable, blurring out her surroundings and keeping her world small. When moments of defiance arise, the frame widens and the depth deepens, restoring some sense of perspective and possibility. There are several shots where the camera lingers longer than expected, allowing unease to simmer. These pauses make the audience anticipate danger even in silence. The use of close-ups is particularly striking. Hands on wheels, pills in palms, a flicker in the eyes, each close-up serves as a clue rather than mere decoration. These tight shots do more than add aesthetic value, they become narrative devices, telling us what cannot be spoken aloud. Similarly, the film occasionally frames characters with obstacles between them. Door frames, stair railings, windows, visual reminders of barriers both physical and emotional. Some of the most memorable visual moments happen when the outside world is glimpsed. Bright, almost overexposed light contrasts with the dim interior, making freedom appear almost unreal or unreachable. This contrast underscores the protagonist's yearning and the gulf between her reality and the world she longs to join. The cinematographer avoids excessive stylization, keeping the imagery grounded but never bland. Each frame feels considered without calling too much attention to itself. Even when tension rises to its peak, the camera does not resort to showy tricks. Instead, it relies on composition and shadow to do the heavy lifting. This restraint enhances the suspense, making the film's aesthetic feel part of its heartbeat rather than an added layer. The interplay of color, framing, and light works in harmony to make Run, 2020, not only a thriller in its narrative but also in its visuals. Every decision behind the lens serves the story of control, restriction, and the desperate push for independence. It is cinematography that does not overwhelm the viewer but pulls them deeper, scene by scene, until the atmosphere feels as suffocating or as fleetingly liberating as the moments on screen. Editing and pacing are the invisible hands that guide a viewer's experience, and in Run, 2020, they are central to how tension is created and sustained. From the very first sequence, the film establishes a deliberate rhythm that reflects the slow but creeping sense of unease at its core. The editing avoids being overly flashy, leaning more toward functional cuts that keep the narrative progressing, yet there are moments where subtle choices elevate the suspense. Transitions are mostly clean, avoiding abrupt jumps that would jolt the audience out of the story, though there are a few intentional cuts designed to unsettle or leave a lingering question. This approach works well in the first act, where the film balances exposition with hints of mystery, allowing the audience to get comfortable with the pacing while sensing something beneath the surface is not quite right. As the story progresses into the second act, the editing becomes tighter, with scenes trimmed to their essential beats to maintain a forward drive. This is where montages or brief sequences of quick cuts are occasionally used, particularly when the protagonist begins to piece together clues or when tension spikes during moments of discovery. These faster sequences contrast well with the more patient earlier editing, creating a sense of acceleration as the stakes rise. Cross-cutting is employed sparingly but effectively, often to heighten suspense by showing two simultaneous threads, what the protagonist is doing and what another character might be hiding or planning. This keeps the viewer slightly ahead of the protagonist at times, building dramatic irony and anticipation. Pacing overall is one of the film's strengths, but it does experience minor fluctuations that may divide audiences. For some, the first act's steady, almost restrained unfolding might feel too slow, especially if they come expecting a thriller with relentless movement. For others, this measured start allows for richer character setup and makes the later urgency feel earned. The third act ramps up significantly, shifting into a faster, almost breathless rhythm as events come to a head. This escalation feels natural, though in a few places, it edges toward being slightly rushed. Resolutions arrive quickly after prolonged build-up, leaving little room for the tension to fully breathe before the next beat hits. The film does not rely heavily on flashbacks, and when they appear, they are brief and purposeful, offering fragments of information rather than full scenes. These are edited in with a clear intent to disrupt the linearity just enough to plant questions or provide sudden clarity, rather than confuse. The sparing use of such devices means that when they do appear, they carry weight. Silence and stillness are also key tools in the editing language of Run. There are stretches where the absence of cuts, letting a shot linger just a few seconds longer than expected, creates a palpable unease. This restraint is particularly noticeable in moments where the protagonist is alone, contemplating their next move or sensing a presence nearby. In these sequences, the lack of rapid cutting allows the viewer to inhabit the same space of waiting and watching, making any sudden cut or shift more impactful. At its best, the editing amplifies emotion rather than dictating it. There is a hallway sequence midway through the film, for example, where the rhythm of cuts mirrors the protagonist's mounting anxiety. Each new angle feels slightly closer, slightly tighter, until the tension snaps. Conversely, there are moments where a more restrained approach might have served better. A couple of confrontations in the final act are cut so quickly between close-ups and reaction shots that the emotional weight is diluted. A slower rhythm here, allowing faces to hold the frame and reactions to linger, could have heightened the impact of those exchanges. Ultimately, the editing and pacing of Run walk a line between control and urgency. It is clear that the filmmakers aim to craft a thriller that does not sacrifice clarity for speed, yet also does not wallow in its quieter moments for too long. The rhythm across acts, deliberate build, accelerating middle, and a brisk finale, reflects a classic thriller structure, but with enough variation in shot length and transition style to avoid predictability. If there is one area where the film might have benefited from a slightly different rhythm, it is in its denouement, where a brief pause to absorb the consequences of the climax could have offered a more satisfying emotional landing. Still, as a whole, the editing choices keep the story cohesive and the tension largely intact, guiding viewers through an experience that is rarely confusing and often gripping. The soundtrack and score of Run, 2020, play a crucial role in shaping its psychological tension and emotional undertone, acting almost like a silent narrator guiding the viewer's feelings from scene to scene. From the very beginning, The film relies on music not just as background noise but as an active element of storytelling. The score introduces a haunting yet restrained motif that subtly weaves through the film, often appearing at moments where the mother's true intentions begin to surface or when the daughter senses danger. This recurring cue creates an auditory breadcrumb trail for the audience, connecting moments of doubt, fear, and revelation with a consistent sonic thread. It ensures that even in scenes with little dialogue, the tension is palpable and unspoken thoughts are communicated through the rise and fall of the music. Licensed music is used sparingly, and this restraint helps maintain the film's claustrophobic and intimate atmosphere. When it does appear, it tends to contrast the unsettling tone with something more familiar, which in turn makes the darker moments feel even more pronounced. The lack of an overbearing or overpopulated soundtrack works in the film's favor because it allows silence to become a tool rather than an absence. Silence in Run, 2020, is often louder than any score could be, particularly in scenes where the daughter quietly plots her next move or where a pause stretches out the suspense. These moments of near silence are rarely empty. They hum with tension, the faint sound of breath, or the subtle creak of a floorboard acting as their own form of music. One of the film's strongest uses of music is its timing. The score does not overwhelm every revelation or scare but instead chooses its moments carefully. When the story accelerates, the music tends to follow, quickening its tempo and layering dissonant strings or sharp notes that mirror the frantic energy of the chase. During more introspective moments, it pulls back, opting for minimal instrumentation that reflects the isolation and emotional distance between the two main characters. This ability to adapt to the rhythm of the narrative shows that the score is not a decorative layer but an integral part of the film's pacing and tone. There are also instances where the music deliberately manipulates tension. A seemingly calm scene might carry an undercurrent of unease thanks to a low, almost imperceptible hum or a discordant note that lingers longer than expected. This technique keeps viewers alert, never quite able to settle, even when the visuals suggest stillness. In a few key scenes, this manipulation heightens the stakes significantly, turning what could have been a simple exchange into a moment heavy with dread. These choices make the music a psychological companion to the visual suspense, subtly instructing the audience on when to lean forward or when to hold their breath. However, the score is not flawless. There are moments where it risks being too explicit, where the cue feels like it is telling the audience what to feel rather than allowing the emotion to surface naturally. A few of the climactic beats are accompanied by swells that might have been more effective if left understated, allowing the actors' performances and the sharpness of the editing to carry the weight. This is a delicate balance in thrillers. Too much musical emphasis can rob a scene of its rawness, but too little risks leaving it flat. Run, 2020, mostly finds the right middle ground, but its few missteps remind us how easily sound can tip a moment into melodrama. What ultimately elevates the soundtrack and score in this film is its integration with silence. The filmmakers seem aware that sound is not only about what is added but also what is withheld. In the quietest moments, where footsteps echo or a heartbeat seems to fill the space, the absence of a traditional score amplifies the paranoia and makes the audience hyper-aware of every detail. This interplay between presence and absence ensures that the sound design feels dynamic rather than repetitive. In the end, the music of Run, 2020, is less about memorable standalone tracks and more about the invisible scaffolding it provides for the story. It creeps in when needed, retreats when silence can do the heavy lifting, and offers just enough thematic continuity through its recurring motifs to leave an imprint after the credits roll. While it may not boast iconic melodies that linger in popular culture, it succeeds in what a thriller score should do: keep the audience on edge, shape their emotional journey without drawing too much attention to itself, and elevate the film's central moments from ordinary tension to memorable suspense. Themes and messages form the backbone of Run, 2020, shaping the way audiences interpret the story beyond its surface-level thrills. Beneath its gripping plot lies a psychological and emotional exploration of control, dependency, and the often complex bonds between a parent and a child. One of the central themes that the film wrestles with is the idea of control disguised as care. The narrative follows a mother who exerts an unhealthy level of control over her daughter, under the pretense of protecting her. This dynamic raises questions about how love can be twisted into obsession, and how acts presented as nurturing can become acts of domination when they limit another person's autonomy. The film consistently explores this theme through the mother's actions, controlling what her daughter eats, where she goes, what she learns, and even how she perceives her own body. It invites viewers to consider the fine line between caregiving and imprisonment, between selfless love and selfish fear of letting go. Another prominent theme in the film is independence and the struggle for freedom. The daughter's journey reflects a broader human experience of breaking free from oppressive forces, whether they are parental, societal, or internal. Through her actions, choices, and resourcefulness, the story conveys the importance of questioning authority, seeking truth, and fighting for one's right to live freely. This message is particularly resonant as the film depicts her growth from passive acceptance to active rebellion. Each attempt to escape or uncover the truth becomes symbolic of reclaiming her identity and asserting her own voice in a world carefully constructed to silence her. Fear is also a recurring motif, manifesting both as a tool of control and as a barrier to liberation. The mother uses fear to maintain dominance, creating an environment where the daughter doubts her strength and fears the outside world. At the same time, the daughter grapples with her own fear of failing, of being wrong, or of what life might be like beyond her confined reality. The tension between these fears drives the story forward and illustrates how fear can both protect and imprison. The film does not shy away from showing how difficult it is to dismantle fear that has been instilled over a lifetime, making the moments of courage all the more impactful. The film also delves into the theme of deception and the fragility of trust. Almost every relationship in the story is touched by some form of deception, whether it is overt manipulation or the withholding of truth. The mother's elaborate lies about the daughter's health conditions are central to the plot, but the thematic resonance goes further. It raises uncomfortable questions about how much of what we believe about ourselves comes from the narratives others impose on us. This exploration of truth versus illusion makes the audience reflect on the power dynamics that exist in relationships built on imbalance, where one person holds the knowledge and the other is left in the dark. A subtler but important message within the film is resilience. Despite the oppressive environment and the physical and psychological challenges the daughter faces, the story underscores the human capacity to adapt, resist, and survive. Her intelligence, determination, and small acts of defiance accumulate into a powerful statement about the strength that can emerge from even the most constrained circumstances. This message resonates universally, reminding viewers that resilience is often born from hardship. What makes the thematic exploration of Run, 2020, compelling is how often it communicates these ideas visually and through action rather than overloading the audience with dialogue. A look, a locked door, a pill bottle, or a failed attempt to escape carries as much thematic weight as any spoken line. The movie uses imagery, such as the wheelchair and the physical spaces that both shelter and confine, to reinforce its themes without the need for constant verbal exposition. At times, this subtlety allows for multiple interpretations, as viewers might see the mother as both villain and victim or the daughter's triumph as both a personal and symbolic act. However, the film also flirts with mixed signals. There are moments where the mother's motivations are portrayed with hints of sympathy, suggesting fear of loss or trauma from the past, yet the narrative often leans heavily into villainizing her without fully unpacking her complexities. This creates an interesting tension. Is the story condemning her entirely, or is it inviting viewers to consider how love can turn toxic when it becomes possessive? Similarly, while the film largely champions freedom and independence, it occasionally leaves unanswered how those who are freed from control learn to rebuild trust in others. Ultimately, the themes and messages of Run, 2020, resonate because they tap into primal emotions. The need for freedom, the fear of abandonment, the bonds of family, and the resilience of the human spirit. Whether viewed as a suspenseful thriller or a psychological study, the film challenges audiences to think about the ways love can both heal and harm, and how survival often requires not just escape from a physical space but liberation from the narratives imposed upon us. The visual effects and CGI in Run, 2020, serve as subtle yet impactful tools that help create a sense of immersion rather than overwhelm the narrative with flashy digital work. Unlike large-scale action or science fiction films, this movie relies more on atmosphere and tension than on massive, overt effects. That said, the use of visual effects is carefully considered and tailored to specific moments that require enhancement. When VFX is present, it tends to blend with the practical elements on screen, making the environment feel authentic and consistent with the film's grounded tone. One of the strengths of the visual effects in this film lies in their restraint. They do not attempt to dominate the scenes or draw unnecessary attention. Instead, they enhance small but significant details that amplify suspense and help the audience focus on the emotional weight of the narrative. For example, certain transitions in the film involve subtle digital compositing that maintains continuity between shots, making the pacing seamless without the viewer consciously noticing the work behind it. The CGI is used sparingly to maintain the intimate and claustrophobic nature of the story, which primarily revolves around a mother and daughter and the secrets hidden within their home. Practical effects take precedence wherever possible, lending a tactile quality to key moments. This choice of favoring practical elements ensures that the suspense feels real and that the audience remains invested in the characters rather than distracted by artificial visuals. There are sequences where effects play a crucial role in heightening the sense of danger or unease, but they are crafted in a way that supports the storytelling rather than serving as a spectacle. For instance, moments involving physical limitations, environmental transitions, or tension-building sequences often require slight digital manipulation to make them more convincing. These adjustments are executed with precision so that they do not stand out as obviously computer-generated, but rather as seamless enhancements to the existing cinematography. When compared to many modern thrillers that often overuse CGI to exaggerate environments or create unnecessary visual noise, Run, 2020, stands out for its understated approach. The visual effects function like an invisible hand, guiding the audience without overtly declaring their presence. Even in scenes where digital work is more pronounced, such as those involving heightened stakes or key reveals, the execution remains grounded and never crosses the line into implausibility. Motion capture or heavy compositing is minimal, as the story does not demand fantastical creatures or large-scale world-building. Instead, the focus is on enhancing real-world settings, manipulating lighting, shadows, and perspective to subtly steer the viewer's emotions. This attention to detail ensures that the film maintains a strong sense of realism while still benefiting from the polish that modern effects can provide. There are rare moments where the CGI may feel slightly noticeable to a trained eye, particularly in sequences that involve rapid transitions or complex physical interactions that were difficult to achieve practically. However, these instances are fleeting and do not disrupt the overall flow of the film. They are quickly grounded by strong performances and a consistent visual language that relies on atmosphere over spectacle. Ultimately, the visual effects and CGI in Run, 2020, serve their purpose by remaining invisible when needed and stepping into the spotlight only when absolutely necessary. They reinforce the tension, support the claustrophobic setting, and elevate key moments without breaking the immersion that is crucial for a psychological thriller of this nature. The result is a technically sound film where digital and practical elements coexist harmoniously, allowing the audience to remain focused on the unfolding story rather than the mechanics behind it. The set design and locations in Run 2020 play a crucial role in shaping the story's tense and claustrophobic atmosphere. Most of the film is set within the walls of a rural, isolated house, where Diane keeps her daughter Chloe sheltered from the outside world. This house becomes almost a character itself, embodying the themes of confinement, control, and manipulation. The production team clearly paid close attention to how every corner of the home reflects Diane's obsession with control and her ability to create an environment that supports her narrative of care while concealing her darker intentions. The spaces are practical yet filled with a subtle sense of unease, achieved through carefully chosen props, furniture arrangements, and lighting that shifts in tone as the tension builds. The house is filled with medical equipment, pill bottles, and tools that initially suggest a protective, nurturing space for a sick child but gradually reveal a more sinister layer of dependence and entrapment. The production design uses these elements to subtly foreshadow the truth about Chloe's condition and Diane's manipulation. Hallways are often narrow, adding to the feeling of restriction, while doors and locked cabinets act as physical barriers representing the limits placed on Chloe's freedom. The choice of muted colors and a somewhat dated interior decor reinforces the sense of a life paused, a space untouched by the vibrancy of the outside world. These design choices are intentional, creating a feeling that time has stood still in this home, much like Chloe's ability to live freely has been stunted. Beyond the house, the film makes limited but impactful use of external locations. The rural setting itself is vital, as it isolates Chloe from any immediate help or escape routes. Shots of the surrounding woods, small-town streets, and the distant, hard-to-reach pharmacy emphasize how difficult it is for her to navigate the world alone. These locations are not lavish or over-designed. Instead, they feel lived in and believable, anchoring the story in a setting that could easily exist in reality. The bus ride scene, for example, uses the everyday setting of public transport to deliver a critical turning point in the plot, showing how ordinary spaces can become stages for extraordinary tension. Studio builds and real locations appear to be used seamlessly. Interior shots, particularly in the kitchen, living room, and Chloe's bedroom, allow the audience to understand the geography of the home, which becomes crucial during moments of escape and pursuit. The layout is designed so viewers can almost map the house in their minds, enhancing the suspense when Chloe maneuvers her wheelchair or when Diane moves unpredictably through the space. Props such as the wheelchair ramp, medical charts, and the computer with locked settings all serve both functional and symbolic purposes. They reflect the veneer of care Diane projects while hinting at the control mechanisms embedded in every corner. Small details in set dressing enrich the world further. Framed photographs suggest a mother-daughter bond, but their careful arrangement and prominence also suggest Diane's desire to control the narrative of their life together. The garden outside, seemingly tranquil, contrasts with the psychological prison inside. The pharmacy and hospital locations, though appearing briefly, are designed with stark lighting and sterile colors that emphasize the contrast between institutional help and the deceptive comfort of home. In summary, the production design and choice of locations in Run are understated yet highly effective. They do not distract with extravagance but instead build a believable world where tension thrives in the ordinary. The sets help the actors deliver authentic performances, as the spaces feel tangible and restrictive in ways that directly influence their movements and interactions. Each location, from the cluttered kitchen to the cold pharmacy counter, serves a narrative purpose, helping to immerse the audience in Chloe's struggle for autonomy while visually reinforcing the film's central themes of control, isolation, and survival. The dialogue and script of Run, 2020, serve as a backbone for its psychological tension and character-driven narrative, playing a significant role in shaping the tone and rhythm of the film. Written by Aneesh Chaganty and Seva, the script focuses on a tight interplay between the two main characters, Diane Sherman and her daughter Chloe. The dialogue is often minimalistic, reflecting the isolated world they inhabit and the suffocating dynamic that defines their relationship. The film does not rely heavily on long-winded exchanges, but instead uses short, tense conversations that reveal underlying truths without explicitly stating them. This approach makes the dialogue feel natural and authentic, as real-life conversations often contain more between the lines than in the words themselves. One of the strengths of the script is how it uses dialogue to hint at the central mystery without giving too much away early on. Diane's words are carefully chosen, often framed as caring and protective, but when examined closely, they carry a controlling undertone that gradually reveals her manipulative nature. Simple reassurances like telling Chloe that everything is fine or that she is doing things for her own good are laced with subtext, leaving the viewer questioning her sincerity. Chloe's dialogue, on the other hand, evolves as the story progresses. At first, her words are obedient, reflecting her dependence on her mother and her limited understanding of the outside world. However, as she begins to uncover secrets, her speech becomes more assertive and questioning, a reflection of her growing independence and suspicion. The contrast between Chloe's hesitant inquiries and Diane's defensive or dismissive responses creates a powerful push-and-pull dynamic that drives the narrative tension. There are moments where silence in the film speaks louder than any dialogue could. For instance, when Chloe discovers certain medications or starts piecing together the inconsistencies in her life, the script allows pauses and lingering shots to convey her realization rather than forcing her to verbalize it. This restraint in writing is a testament to the strength of the script, as it trusts the audience to pick up on visual cues and body language rather than spoon-feeding them every revelation through dialogue. The film also makes effective use of conversations as plot engines. Phone calls, overheard snippets, and brief interactions with outsiders become critical turning points, propelling the story forward without unnecessary exposition. The dialogue is often economical, ensuring that every line serves either to build character or to advance the suspense. There is very little filler or padding, though some viewers may find a few exchanges predictable, especially in moments designed to mislead or set up later twists. Subtext is one of the script's strongest tools. Diane's constant emphasis on Chloe's health, her control over her daughter's medications, and her insistence on isolation all carry a double meaning that only becomes clear as the truth is revealed. The words seem protective on the surface, but their true intention is manipulation and control. This layered writing adds depth to Diane as a character, making her more than a one-dimensional antagonist. A few areas of the script could have benefited from tighter rewrites, particularly in moments where Chloe's discoveries feel slightly rushed or where the dialogue leans too heavily into explaining rather than showing. However, these instances are minimal and do not significantly detract from the overall impact. The balance between spoken lines and visual storytelling remains one of the film's defining strengths. Ultimately, the dialogue in Run, 2020, is sharp, restrained, and deliberately constructed to keep audiences engaged and unsettled. It reveals character motivations subtly, uses tension-filled exchanges to heighten suspense, and employs silence effectively to create moments of reflection and dread. The script does not rely on grand speeches or overt exposition but instead allows the characters' words, and the spaces between them, to carry the emotional and narrative weight. This combination of minimalism and precision helps establish the claustrophobic, manipulative world in which Chloe struggles to find her voice, making the dialogue a crucial element in the film's storytelling success. The genre execution in Run, 2020, plays a critical role in defining its overall impact and how audiences perceive its story. The film primarily operates as a psychological thriller with elements of suspense and drama. At its core, it builds tension around a confined and intense relationship between a mother and her daughter, unfolding in a setting that feels both intimate and isolating. The execution follows many conventions of the thriller genre such as slow reveals, sudden twists, and the ever-present feeling of dread, but it also steps into emotional and dramatic territory by focusing heavily on the bond and tension between its central characters rather than relying solely on external dangers or fast-paced action. This approach creates a hybrid that balances psychological manipulation with real-world fears, making the narrative more grounded while still delivering moments of heightened suspense. The film honors several classic beats of its genre effectively. From the early establishment of a seemingly ordinary yet slightly off-kilter household to the gradual uncovering of hidden truths, it maintains a slow-burn tension that is a hallmark of psychological thrillers. Scenes are constructed to raise suspicion subtly, leading the audience to question what is real and what is manipulated. This technique is effective in keeping viewers engaged without resorting to unnecessary jump scares or over-the-top action sequences. Instead, it uses the quiet dread of anticipation, the unease of limited freedom, and the weight of dependence to fuel its suspense. In this way, it meets the expectations of thriller enthusiasts who appreciate tension built through clever storytelling rather than constant visual shocks. Where Run takes steps to refresh the genre is in its character dynamic and setting. Rather than centering on strangers or external threats, the story revolves around a mother-daughter relationship, turning what is usually seen as nurturing into something sinister and controlling. This twist on a familial bond injects fresh emotional stakes into the thriller formula, as the antagonist is not a distant villain but a trusted figure. It avoids the cliché of random predators or faceless conspiracies and instead focuses on manipulation, dependency, and the claustrophobic fear of being controlled by someone close. For fans of the genre, this inversion of roles provides a chilling perspective that feels new while still aligned with psychological thriller themes of power and control. However, the film does lean on some familiar tropes that seasoned viewers of this genre might find predictable. The use of isolated settings, the physical limitations of a vulnerable protagonist, and the gradual revelation of a controlling caretaker are elements seen in previous thrillers. While these tropes are executed well, they do not completely break new ground. Certain twists can be anticipated by those familiar with similar films, and this predictability might lessen the shock value for some. Nevertheless, the movie compensates for this with strong performances and a consistent tone that makes even expected turns feel engaging and tense. One of the ways the genre is honored without alienating audiences is through its careful pacing. It does not rush to reveal its secrets, allowing the suspense to build organically. This respect for slow tension is a key expectation in psychological thrillers, and Run manages to deliver it without dragging the story unnecessarily. Its ability to create a sense of entrapment through mundane details, medical routines, and restricted environments speaks to a refined understanding of the genre's strengths. Fans who seek character-driven thrills are likely to appreciate this approach, while those expecting high-octane sequences may find it more subdued but still compelling. In terms of risk-taking, the film walks a fine line. By choosing to focus on emotional manipulation and domestic control rather than overt violence or external villains, it risks narrowing its appeal to those who prefer psychological intensity over physical confrontation. This choice, however, also distinguishes it from formulaic thrillers, giving it a more intimate and unnerving edge. It succeeds in generating empathy for the protagonist while building animosity toward the antagonist in a way that feels personal rather than abstract. Overall, the genre execution of Run, 2020, effectively delivers what psychological thriller fans expect: tension, manipulation, and a sense of ever-tightening control. It avoids many cheap tricks in favor of layered suspense and character-driven stakes, refreshing the genre through its focus on a toxic family dynamic while still relying on certain familiar devices to structure its story. The result is a film that feels both comfortably within its genre and slightly evolved, striking a balance between tradition and innovation. Run, 2020, carries with it a subtle but impactful layer of social and cultural commentary that goes beyond its surface as a psychological thriller. The film primarily revolves around the complex and toxic relationship between a mother, Diane Sherman, and her daughter, Chloe Sherman. At its core, it explores themes of control, dependency, trust, and the thin line between care and manipulation, which resonate with a broader audience because they reflect certain real-world dynamics. The film uses this personal, claustrophobic story as a lens to reflect on wider societal issues such as parental overprotection, medical ethics, and the struggles of individuals with disabilities in environments where their autonomy is often undermined. One of the strongest social commentaries in the film lies in its depiction of Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a form of abuse where a caregiver fabricates or induces illness in someone under their care to maintain control or gain attention. Through Diane's character, the film showcases how a parent's overreach, even when disguised as love and care, can result in devastating consequences for the child. This mirrors real-life cases where individuals, often women in caregiving roles, commit similar abuses under the guise of selflessness. The film does not present this as an isolated pathology but hints at the systemic enablers around it, such as unquestioning trust in caregivers and a lack of oversight in medical or homeschooling environments. By focusing on this, Run invites viewers to question where the line lies between protection and oppression, particularly in contexts where children or dependent adults are denied their voice. Another important cultural element the movie touches upon is the representation of disability. Chloe, played by Kiera Allen, is a wheelchair user, and unlike many Hollywood films that cast able-bodied actors in such roles, Run deliberately chose an actress with a real-life disability. This decision enhances the film's authenticity and highlights ongoing conversations about representation in media. Chloe's character is not reduced to her disability. Rather, her strength, intelligence, and resilience define her far more than her physical limitations. However, the movie also raises the uncomfortable truth of how people with disabilities can be more vulnerable to manipulation or exploitation, especially when isolated by circumstances such as homeschooling and controlled access to the outside world. It reflects societal tendencies to infantilize or underestimate individuals with disabilities, assuming their dependency as permanent and unquestionable. The cultural commentary also extends to the broader idea of isolation and parental authority. Set mostly within the confines of a home, the film reflects on how isolation can breed dependence and control, especially when combined with misinformation or withheld truth. Diane's manipulation of Chloe's world, from her education to her medications, mirrors concerns about information gatekeeping in other areas of life, including how institutions or authority figures control narratives to maintain dominance. In this sense, the story can be read as a microcosm of larger power dynamics, where those in control often claim benevolence while stripping others of their agency. There is also an undercurrent of feminist interpretation in the way the film depicts the toxic maternal bond. Diane's character defies the traditional image of a selfless, nurturing mother, presenting instead a complex figure whose identity is deeply tied to control over her child. Some viewers may see this as a critique of societal expectations placed on women to be defined by their caregiving roles, while others might interpret it as reinforcing the trope of the deranged mother. This duality adds a layer of ambiguity to the commentary, leaving room for debate about whether the film challenges or inadvertently perpetuates stereotypes about motherhood. The timing of the film's release also adds relevance to its themes. Coming out in 2020, a year marked by widespread lockdowns and heightened awareness of health, dependence, and confinement, Run resonated with audiences who had experienced isolation and increased reliance on caregivers or authority figures. The story's claustrophobic setting echoed the real-life atmosphere of that period, amplifying its tension and making its themes of autonomy and control feel even more urgent. Overall, the social and cultural commentary in Run is effective because it does not overshadow the thriller aspect of the film but enriches it. The story's intimate scale allows it to explore universal questions. How much control is too much? At what point does care become harmful? How do societal structures enable such dynamics to persist? While some critics argue the film simplifies the complexities of mental illness and caregiving, its core message about the importance of autonomy, informed choice, and the resilience of those underestimated by society remains impactful. Audience engagement in Run, 2020, is a significant part of its impact as a psychological thriller. The film is designed to pull viewers in emotionally and keep them tense throughout its runtime, and several scenes stand out as the most engaging and memorable. One of the strongest elements that keeps audiences hooked is the dynamic between Chloe, a wheelchair-bound teenager played by Kiera Allen, and her overprotective mother Diane, portrayed by Paulson. The evolving relationship between the two is filled with suspicion, manipulation, and eventual revelation, creating a constant sense of unease and curiosity. Viewers are immediately invested in Chloe's quest for independence and truth, while Diane's controlling nature provokes both frustration and fear. This mother-daughter dynamic is the emotional core of the film, and their confrontations provide some of the most talked-about moments. Scenes where Chloe begins to uncover her mother's secrets are particularly engaging. For example, the sequence where she investigates her medication and realizes it is intended for dogs rather than humans is a pivotal moment that often sparks intense audience reaction. It is a classic twist that shifts the tone from uneasy parenting drama to full-on thriller, making viewers gasp at the betrayal and manipulation she has suffered. Another moment that keeps audiences on edge is when Chloe attempts to escape her room by crawling through the air vent and trying to get to the outside world. The scene is tense, claustrophobic, and layered with desperation, which resonates strongly with viewers who empathize with her struggle. The film also features moments that encourage discussion and debate long after the credits roll. One major point of conversation is Diane's motive and psychology. Is she purely villainous, or is she a tragic figure driven by obsession and unresolved trauma? The final scene, where Chloe takes control of her own life and delivers a shocking act of revenge in the hospital, often leaves viewers debating whether justice was truly served or whether Chloe's final action mirrors the control and cruelty she once suffered. This moral ambiguity adds depth to the story and gives fans a reason to revisit and reinterpret the ending. Certain moments are also crafted for rewatchability, as the film sprinkles subtle clues about Diane's manipulation throughout. Observant viewers may catch early hints, like Diane's strict control over the mail, her interruptions whenever Chloe asks about college letters, and her insistence on personally administering medication. These details reward attentive viewers who enjoy piecing together the mystery and encourage them to revisit the film to spot more clues they might have missed the first time. From a social media and pop culture perspective, Run, 2020, has several scenes that lend themselves to being shared, gifted, or memed. Sarah Paulson's intense expressions, the tense wheelchair chase sequence, and the moment Chloe realizes the truth about her medication have all been highlighted by fans online as signature scenes. The movie's tight pacing and high-stakes sequences create a series of escalating gasp moments rather than a single shocking twist, which keeps viewers engaged from start to finish. Emotionally, the film succeeds in eliciting a range of responses: fear, empathy, anger, and finally relief or satisfaction when Chloe gains the upper hand. The mother-daughter bond, though twisted, is deeply emotional, and some viewers may even feel conflicted sympathy for Diane, especially in the moments where her controlling behavior is revealed to stem from a warped sense of love and fear of loss. This emotional complexity gives the thriller more staying power than a typical single-note suspense film. In summary, Run, 2020, engages its audience through a combination of high-tension scenes, emotional stakes, and moral questions that linger after viewing. Its carefully placed reveals, suspenseful escape attempts, and psychologically rich characters encourage discussions and rewatchability. Fans are drawn not only to the immediate thrills but also to the deeper dynamics and implications of control, autonomy, and revenge, making it a film that continues to spark conversations well beyond its initial watch. Comparing Run, 2020, to other films within the psychological thriller and horror genre as well as to the previous work of its director Aneesh Chaganty reveals several interesting aspects of its strengths and shortcomings. One of the most immediate comparisons often made is to Chaganty's earlier film Searching, 2018, a mystery thriller that unfolded entirely through computer screens and devices. Searching was praised for its innovative format and tight narrative, and while Run does not adopt the same digital screen style, it shares a similar sense of claustrophobia and reliance on a central, emotionally charged relationship to drive the tension. Both films involve themes of parent-child dynamics and secrets that gradually unravel, but Run is more traditional in its narrative structure, leaning heavily on suspense-driven sequences rather than experimental storytelling techniques. Within its genre, Run draws heavy inspiration from the tradition of maternal horror thrillers such as Misery, 1990, and the psychological manipulations seen in films like Gaslight, 1944. The film's premise, where a mother exerts control over her disabled daughter, echoes Misery in its theme of entrapment and dependency, where a vulnerable individual must outwit a seemingly caring but ultimately harmful caretaker. The tension, confined setting, and dynamic of captor versus captive clearly nod to such classics, but Run attempts to modernize the formula with a brisk runtime and a focus on a younger protagonist who displays both physical and mental resilience despite her limitations. In that sense, the film borrows smartly from its predecessors but simplifies the layers of psychological torment that older films often explored more deeply, favoring fast-paced thrills over prolonged dread. Another apt comparison is with films centered on Munchausen syndrome by proxy, such as the Hulu series The Act or even the documentary Mommy Dead and Dearest, which inspired it. Run treads similar ground in portraying a caregiver who induces or fabricates illness to maintain control. However, while those works delve deeply into the disturbing psychological mechanisms behind such behavior, Chaganty's film uses the condition primarily as a plot device to set up the suspense and reveal the antagonist's deception. This is both a strength and a weakness. The narrative moves efficiently and rarely lingers too long, which makes it accessible and engaging, but it also misses an opportunity to explore the disturbing reality of such abuse with greater nuance. In terms of stylistic execution, Run's tight runtime and minimal locations recall the simplicity of earlier thrillers like Wait Until Dark, 1967, where a disabled protagonist also uses wit and resourcefulness to survive an oppressive threat. The parallels are clear in terms of the suspense mechanics, creeping around confined spaces, limited ability to escape, and the slow realization of betrayal, but Run is more kinetic, with modern cinematography and a slightly heightened tone that caters to contemporary audiences' appetite for quick escalation. This gives it a slick, almost made-for-streaming quality compared to the theatrical, deliberately paced classics it mirrors. Where Run distinguishes itself is in its casting and the fresh dynamic between Sarah Paulson as the mother and Kiera Allen as the daughter. Unlike many similar thrillers, this film foregrounds disability representation authentically, with Allen being a wheelchair user herself. This gives the film a dimension of realism missing in some predecessors, even if the script sometimes glosses over the full implications of living with such limitations in favor of thrilling escapes and sudden bursts of action. Compared to Chaganty's Searching, Run feels more conventional in its story beats but benefits from a tightly focused two-character interplay that draws audiences into their tense and evolving relationship. Ultimately, when placed alongside similar films, Run neither fully reinvents the wheel nor falls into outright imitation. It stands as a streamlined modern take on a classic formula, with its brevity, sharp performances, and straightforward suspense standing out as strengths, while its lack of deeper exploration into its psychological or social themes limits its staying power when compared to richer, more layered thrillers of the past. In Run, 2020, symbolism and metaphors play an important role in shaping the psychological tension and deepening the emotional weight of the story. The film uses certain objects, colors, and repeated visual elements to express ideas that go beyond what is spoken by the characters. One of the most prominent symbols in the film is the wheelchair used by Chloe. While on the surface it represents her physical limitations, it also symbolizes her dependence on her mother, Diane, and the control Diane exerts over her life. The wheelchair becomes a visual reminder of how trapped Chloe is, not only physically but also emotionally and psychologically. As the story progresses, her attempts to break free from it reflect her growing independence and strength. The use of medication is another symbolic element throughout the film. The pills Chloe takes daily are supposed to represent care and treatment, but in reality, they are the tools of Diane's manipulation. The revelation about the altered medication reflects the theme of trust being violated, and the pills become a metaphor for control disguised as love. They are a constant, subtle reminder of how easily a caregiver's role can turn into one of domination under the mask of concern. The house itself acts as a metaphorical prison. Much of the story takes place within its walls, which creates a feeling of isolation and confinement. The locked doors, hidden compartments, and lack of access to the outside world emphasize how Chloe's life has been restricted to what Diane wants her to see and experience. Even the placement of the house in a relatively secluded area reinforces this sense of entrapment. Color is also used to create symbolic undertones in Run. The muted tones in Chloe's environment suggest a lack of vitality and freedom, while the rare appearances of vibrant colors often indicate fleeting moments of hope or realization. For instance, scenes where Chloe uncovers the truth about her condition often use slightly harsher lighting or more pronounced contrasts to symbolize her awakening to reality. Another key visual motif is technology, particularly Chloe's use of the computer and the internet. These moments symbolize her quest for knowledge and the power of information to free her from her mother's lies. The struggle to access the internet despite Diane's restrictions reflects the larger struggle for autonomy in a controlled environment. Even the movie's title, Run, carries metaphorical weight. It signifies both the physical escape Chloe must attempt and the emotional and psychological journey of breaking free from control and manipulation. Running is not just about moving away from the house, it is about gaining independence, discovering the truth, and reclaiming her own life. The film also leaves certain metaphors intentionally unresolved, such as the ambiguity of Diane's love. Is it genuine but warped, or purely self-serving? This ambiguity adds to the tension, forcing viewers to question the fine line between love, obsession, and control. The use of these symbols and metaphors adds layers to the viewing experience, making the film more than just a simple thriller. It invites the audience to look beyond the surface of the story and recognize how everyday objects and actions can hold darker meanings when placed under scrutiny. Each element contributes to the theme of freedom versus captivity and how far one might go to control or escape it. Run, 2020, is not part of a franchise, nor does it directly tie into any larger cinematic universe or series, but it exists in a context that draws heavily on the history of psychological thrillers and suspense films centered on isolation, control, and maternal manipulation. Directed by Aneesh Chaganty, who previously helmed the critically acclaimed film Searching, 2018, Run continues his exploration of enclosed settings and intense character dynamics, though in a very different narrative form. While it is a standalone story, the film does carry influences from earlier works such as Misery, 1990, Carrie, 1976, and the psychological themes seen in Alfred Hitchcock's suspenseful narratives. These references and inspirations are not direct continuations but rather echoes of familiar tropes that have shaped how viewers interpret the film. Historically, Run also aligns with a growing body of thrillers featuring disability, chronic illness, and caregiver-patient dynamics, though it uses them in a fictionalized and dramatized manner rather than a purely realistic one. The portrayal of Munchausen syndrome by proxy, while rooted in a real psychological condition, is heightened for the sake of dramatic tension and does not aim to deliver a clinical study. In this sense, the film takes liberties with medical accuracy, presenting a version of illness and manipulation that is more exaggerated than what is typically documented in real-life cases. It uses this historical and psychological framework to enhance the mother-daughter conflict at its core. For fans of Chaganty's work, there are small stylistic Easter eggs and thematic consistencies that might be recognized, including his use of enclosed spaces, reliance on technology as a subtle narrative tool, and the gradual peeling back of secrets through observation rather than exposition. Unlike many thrillers that rely on external forces or conspiracies, Run focuses almost entirely on a two-character power struggle, which places it historically alongside a tradition of chamber thrillers where tension builds through limited settings and few players. There are no explicit callbacks to a broader series or prior films in its narrative world, but viewers familiar with similar mother-child psychological thrillers will notice how Run modernizes certain elements, such as setting the story in a more technology-aware era and presenting the daughter as resourceful despite her physical limitations. From a cultural perspective, the film arrived in a time when representation of differently abled characters in cinema was being more closely examined. Run was notable for casting Kiera Allen, a wheelchair user in real life, in a leading role. This decision places the film within a historical moment of greater awareness and demand for authentic casting, making it a step forward compared to earlier films that often featured non-disabled actors in such roles. While the movie does not connect to historical events in a traditional sense, it taps into a history of parental control narratives that date back to fairy tales and Gothic literature, where the home is both a place of care and imprisonment. It dramatizes this theme to an extreme by turning a mother's overprotection into a weapon. In doing so, it participates in a long lineage of stories that question the boundary between love and control, safety and captivity. Overall, Run, 2020, stands as a modern entry in a historically rich genre rather than a piece of a serialized or franchise-driven narrative, using selective historical and psychological influences to craft its isolated yet resonant tale. The production budget of Run, 2020, was relatively modest compared to major Hollywood blockbusters, estimated at around $1 million. Despite the limited budget, the film manages to create a visually striking and tension-filled experience that feels more expansive than its cost would suggest. Much of this comes down to smart use of resources, careful location choices, and a focus on intimate settings rather than large-scale action or special effects. The story primarily takes place within the confines of a house, which not only suits the narrative but also significantly reduces production costs. By building tension through strong performances, tight editing, and atmospheric cinematography, the filmmakers were able to deliver a polished product without relying heavily on expensive CGI or elaborate set pieces. The limited cast also contributes to budget efficiency, with Sarah Paulson and Kiera Allen carrying most of the screen time. This allows for a deeper focus on their dynamic while minimizing the logistical and financial challenges that come with managing a large ensemble. The film's production design further reflects careful planning, using a minimal yet effective approach to props, lighting, and set details to heighten the claustrophobic and suspenseful mood. From a marketing standpoint, Run, 2020, took an interesting path. Initially planned for a traditional theatrical release, the film faced challenges due to the global circumstances of 2020, which pushed many studios to reconsider their strategies. Instead of aiming for a wide cinema release, the film was released via streaming platforms in some regions, most notably on Hulu in the United States. This digital-first approach helped reduce distribution costs while also tapping into the rapidly growing audience of at-home viewers during that period. While it did not generate traditional box office revenue in the same way as a large-scale theatrical run would, it likely benefited from licensing deals and the platform's promotional backing, which ensured significant visibility. Financial success for a film like Run cannot be measured purely by opening weekend box office numbers, especially given its release strategy. Instead, its success is better reflected in its streaming performance, critical reception, and long-term viewership. Positive reviews, particularly praising the performances and tense storytelling, helped build word of mouth, which is crucial for a psychological thriller with a modest budget. The low production costs also mean that the threshold for profitability was not as high as that of big-budget productions, making it easier for the film to break even and turn a profit through combined streaming rights, international sales, and ancillary markets. Ultimately, Run punched above its weight by delivering a high-quality thriller experience on a relatively low budget. It demonstrates how careful planning, efficient resource allocation, and a focus on story over spectacle can allow a film to compete effectively even without massive financial backing. The marketing and release strategy, while unconventional, aligned well with the global situation of the time and may have even contributed to its cultural impact by making it more accessible to a wider audience. Rather than relying on expensive campaigns or large-scale spectacle, it leveraged its tight narrative and strong performances to stand out, proving that a well-executed small-budget film can achieve both critical and financial recognition. Run, 2020, can be experienced in multiple ways depending on the viewer's preference for atmosphere and engagement. While the film was originally intended for a theatrical release, the global circumstances at the time shifted its availability primarily toward digital platforms and streaming services, making it more accessible for home viewing. Watching Run in a theater, when and where it was possible, offered the advantage of heightened tension due to the immersive sound design and larger screen experience, where every shadow, creak, and close-up of Sarah Paulson's intense expressions created a more nerve-wracking ambience. However, for most audiences, the home viewing setup became the default, and this works surprisingly well for a film of this scale because its tension relies less on large-scale action and more on claustrophobic interiors, tight framing, and psychological manipulation. For those with access to high-quality home entertainment systems, watching Run with headphones or a sound system can elevate the experience significantly. The film's sound design, including subtle movements, sudden silences, and the occasional sharp sonic cues, is integral to its suspense, and using headphones helps capture those quiet moments that are easily lost in casual viewing environments. A darkened room also adds to the atmosphere, allowing the viewer to feel the isolation and intensity experienced by the main character, Chloe, as she uncovers the secrets her mother has been hiding. This makes the film particularly suitable for nighttime viewing when distractions are minimal and the eerie undertones can resonate more deeply. Streaming platforms that carry Run often provide it in high definition, and some even offer surround sound compatibility, which enhances the visuals of its confined settings and suburban landscapes. Renting it on demand is another practical option for those who prefer a one-time watch without committing to a subscription. The runtime is relatively tight, so it does not demand an extensive commitment, making it an ideal film for a focused single-session viewing. For families or group viewing, it may not carry the same communal thrill as an action blockbuster, but it does invite post-watch discussion, particularly about its themes of control, manipulation, and parental obsession. Ultimately, the best way to watch Run depends on how much intensity one wishes to extract from the experience. The film thrives in settings where the viewer can pay close attention to its details and mounting suspense. A casual midday watch with background noise might diminish its impact, whereas a quiet evening with minimal interruptions can make every twist more effective. Whether streamed, rented, or caught in a rare theatrical showing, the core psychological edge of the movie remains intact across formats. Those who appreciate slow-building thrillers with strong performances will find that home streaming provides nearly the same level of tension as a theater would have, with the added benefit of convenience and the ability to revisit key scenes. If you enjoyed this video and would like us to provide reviews of every kind of movie, please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. Have a great day, and we'll see you in the next video.
Goodbye.